Hey, my name's Jace Miller. I'm 28, and I live in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Chicago. It's nothing special, just a place to crash after long days hustling whatever odd jobs I can find to make ends meet. Mornings might have me unloading trucks at a warehouse, afternoons delivering packages for some app gig, and evenings fixing leaky faucets or patching drywall for neighbors who pay in cash. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work, and it keeps the lights on while I save for that vocational course in auto mechanics. I've always wanted to open my own small garage someday. Nothing big, just a spot where I can fix things on my terms. Nights like tonight, though, I pull extra shifts at the Grandview Hotel downtown. It's one of those upscale spots where the rich come to pretend life's perfect. I suit up in the standard black vest and tie, grab a tray, and blend into the background, pouring wine, clearing plates, flashing a polite smile before fading away. In places like Grandview, guests pay top dollar to ignore the help, and we're trained to make everything seamless, invisible. The manager assigned me to the VIP section for this event because, as he put it, you know how to keep your mouth shut and move fast. I didn't argue. VIP gigs mean better tips, and I could use every penny toward that course fee I've been eyeing. This wasn't just any night. It was the Armitage Corporation's annual gala, celebrating some milestone for the company. 500 guests packed the ballroom, live orchestra playing soft jazz, crystal chandeliers casting golden light like stars trapped indoors, tables draped in white linen with centerpieces that probably cost more than my rent. Men in tailored tuxedos networked over cigars, women in shimmering gowns laughed with diamond earrings catching the glow. The air smelled of expensive cologne, fresh flowers, and the faint tang of champagne. I weaved through it all, refilling glasses, dodging elbows, feeling that familiar disconnect, like I was watching a movie where everyone else had a starring role, and I was just the extra. That's when I noticed her. Tucked in a quieter corner near a row of less trafficked tables, a young woman sat alone in a deep blue gown that hugged her frame elegantly. Her posture caught my eye first. Shoulders slightly hunched, chin dipped low, hands clasped tightly in her lap, as if holding herself together. The golden light softened her features, but even from a distance, I could see the thick scar running from her temple down to her jaw on the left side of her face. A jagged reminder of something brutal. It wasn't fresh, but it stood out against her pale skin, drawing stares whether she wanted them or not. From the VIP seating chart I'd glanced at earlier, I knew her name. Isla Armitage, 24, daughter of Graham Armitage, the CEO hosting this whole extravaganza. Graham was at the head table, shaking hands and flashing his polished smile to partners and executives. But every few minutes, his eyes drifted to that corner, lingering on his daughter with a mix of concern and helplessness. It wasn't the look of a powerful man reviewing a report. It was a father trying to hold it together while watching his kids suffer in silence. I poured champagne nearby and caught the whispers, words people think go unnoticed if said just low enough. A cluster of young men in sharp suits chuckled, their voices carrying just far enough. Armitage has all that money and his daughter's damn! Even top surgeons couldn't fix that. Who'd ask her to dance? She should have stayed home. Their smirks made my stomach turn. It wasn't the first time I'd heard cruelty wrapped in casual tones, but here, under the fanciest lights, it felt sharper, like velvet hiding a blade. I glanced back at Isla. She heard them. I could tell by the way her knuckles whitened, her lips trembling slightly, eyes blinking fast to hold back tears. She didn't stand up or snap back. Maybe she'd been told to be strong too many times, or maybe standing would just draw more eyes to the scar, turning her into even more of a spectacle. Up at the head table, Graham stiffened, his jaw clenching. He heard too, but he couldn't storm over and make a scene, not without pulling the spotlight harder on her. Power like his, I realized, came with its own cages. The music shifted to a slow ballad, couples drifting to the dance floor, dresses swirling, shoes gliding on the polished wood. The room seemed to pulse with joy, except for that one shadowed corner. In that moment, Isla looked trapped in a crowd, invisible yet exposed, and something in me stirred. An old instinct from my days in the service maybe, where you don't leave someone behind if you can help it. I set my empty tray on a nearby stand, straightened my tie, squared my shoulders like I was about to do the craziest thing in Grandview history. Then I walked toward her. As I approached Isla's table, the hum of conversations around me seemed to stutter, like someone had turned down the volume on the room. I could feel eyes flicking my way, the waiter stepping out of line. What was he doing? But I kept my focus on her, on the way she sat there like a statue carved from tension. She didn't look up at first. I stopped a respectful distance away, hands behind my back, and spoke softly, just loud enough for her ears. Are you all right this evening? Isla's head lifted slowly, her eyes wide and wary, like she'd learned to brace for whatever came next. Curiosity, pity, or worse. Up close, the scar was more pronounced, a raised line that pulled slightly at her skin. But it didn't define her. Her eyes did. Deep, hazel, shadowed by exhaustion, holding a depth that made the room's superficial chatter feel even shallower. She didn't respond right away. I didn't push. Instead, I took a breath and bowed slightly, formal as I'd seen the guests do. May I have this dance? The words hung there, and I heard a collective inhale from nearby tables. The orchestra played on, but the air thickened. Isla stared at me like I'd suggested something absurd. You're the waiter, she whispered, her voice hoarse, glancing at my uniform as if reminding herself or me of the divide. Yes, I said evenly, not breaking eye contact. And if you say no, I'll apologize and go back to my duties. But if you say yes, it would be my honor. Her fingers tightened on the napkin in her lap, knuckles paling further. She swallowed, her gaze darting to the dance floor where couples swayed effortlessly, then back to me. I don't want to get you in trouble. You're not, I replied, keeping my voice steady. You're just sitting alone in a room where you shouldn't have to be. That seemed to hit something in her. Her lips parted slightly and tears welled up, but she blinked them back. She glanced around at the whispers, the stares, then back at me, searching my face for a catch, a joke. Finding none, she hesitated one more beat. Then, slowly, she placed her hand in mine. The ballroom went still, or at least it felt that way. Murmurs rippled out like waves, shock, confusion, maybe a hint of disapproval. I ignored it all, helping her to her feet with care, her gown whispering against the chair. Her hand was cool and trembling in mine, but she didn't pull away. I led her to the edge of the dance floor, away from the center, but not hidden. The music was a gentle waltz now, strings swelling softly. I placed my free hand lightly on her back, keeping a polite gap between us, and began to move. Slow, simple steps, nothing flashy. She was stiff at first, like wood resisting the bend, her eyes fixed on the floor, breaths coming short and uneven. Look at me, I murmured, barely above the music. Not them. Just me. She lifted her gaze, and for a moment our eyes locked. In hers, I saw not just fear, but layers of weariness, the kind that comes from carrying a weight too long. The scar pulled taut as she moved, but I didn't flinch or stare. I just held her steady, guiding her through the rhythm. One step, then another. Her posture eased a fraction, shoulders dropping as the music wrapped around us. The crowd stares burned into my back, but out here it felt like we were in a bubble. A few minutes in, something shifted. Her hand relaxed in mine, her steps sinking better. And then, impossibly, a small smile tugged at her lips. Fragile, like dawn light, but real. It lit her eyes, making the scar seem less like a mark and more like part of a story she'd survived. From the head table, Graham Armitage rose abruptly, his chair scraping back. I caught it in my peripheral, his hand over his mouth, shoulders shaking. Tears streaked his face. Not the composed tears of a tycoon, but raw, like a dam breaking. He'd seen it too. His daughter smiling, truly, for what might have been the first time in years since the accident. The room's reactions mixed. Some guests looked stunned. Others averted their eyes in shame. A few whispered approvals, but most seemed caught off guard, as if kindness had disrupted the script. Isla noticed none of it. Her focus stayed on me, and with each turn I felt her unwind a little more. From terrified to tentative, from trapped to almost free. As the song neared its end, her breath steadied. Thank you, she whispered, voice catching. I haven't done anything yet, I said softly. You were the one who stood up. She smiled again, this time fuller, reaching her eyes. and for a second the ballroom's gold felt warmer. I stepped back as the music faded, ready to bow out and return to my tray. But as I did, something small slipped from my inner vest pocket, clattering lightly on the polished wood floor. A faded blue handkerchief, embroidered with tiny gold flowers and initials in one corner. Graham's eyes locked on it. He strode forward, bending to pick it up with trembling hands. He turned it over, fingers tracing the stitching, his face draining of color. Where, where did you get this? I froze. I knew instantly. This wasn't just my keepsake anymore. Graham held the handkerchief tightly, as if afraid it might vanish. The ballroom's murmurs had died completely now, the orchestra pausing between songs, leaving an unnatural silence that amplified every breath. His fingers traced the embroidered initials, and his face, usually so composed, the mask of a man who commanded boardrooms, crumbled. Where did you get this? He repeated, his voice cracking on the last word. I stood there, heart pounding, the weight of 500 eyes pressing in. The handkerchief had been my talisman for years, a faded reminder tucked in my pocket like a promise I couldn't quite fulfill. But seeing Graham's reaction, I knew this was no longer just mine. My name is Jace Miller, I said, steadying my voice. And I served with your brother, Elliot Armitage. Graham's knees buckled slightly, and he gripped the edge of a nearby table for support. Isla stepped closer, her hand reaching out to steady him, her eyes wide with shock. Dad? She whispered, glancing between us. He didn't look at her yet. His gaze stayed locked on me, tears welling as he turned the fabric over again. This was our mother's stitching. She made it for him before he deployed. Elliot. He never came back. His words hung heavy, raw with the pain of a decade-old wound reopening right there on the dance floor. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. The memories flooded back unbidden. The dust-choked air of that desert outpost, the roar of engines, the chaos of an ambush. I joined the military straight out of high school, looking for structure after a rough upbringing, but nothing prepared me for that day. I was under his command, I said quietly. A routine patrol turned bad. Our vehicle hit an IED, improvised explosive device. It flipped, caught fire. I was trapped in the back, leg-pinned, smoke choking me out. The room was pin-drop silent now. Even the clink of glasses had stopped. I could feel Isla's stare, intense and searching, but I kept going, owing Graham the truth. Elliot, he was our squad leader. He didn't hesitate. Pulled me free, dragged me clear while the flames spread. But as he went back for the driver, another explosion. He didn't make it. Graham's hand covered his mouth, a sob escaping. He sank into a chair someone had pulled over, the handkerchief clutched to his chest like a lifeline. I waited. Over 10 years, he choked out. Reports were vague. They said he died a hero, but I didn't know. If he was alone, if he suffered, if anyone was there with him. I knelt down to his level, voice low but clear. He wasn't alone. I was right there, holding pressure on his wounds. He was in pain, yeah, but he was calm. Talked about your mom, how she always embroidered things for luck. And you? He mentioned you by name, said, tell Graham not to blame himself, and to live kindly, for both of us. Those were his words. He went peacefully, knowing he'd saved lives. Tears streamed down Graham's face now, unchecked. He wasn't the CEO anymore, just a brother grieving what he'd lost, what he'd wondered about in the quiet hours. Elliot was the youngest, he murmured almost to himself. Always the brave one. I tried to talk him out of enlisting, told him we had the family business, a safe life, but he wanted to serve. And I let him go. His voice broke again, shoulders heaving. Isla knelt beside him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders, her own eyes glistening. She looked at me differently now, not as the waiter who'd asked her to dance, but as someone who'd carried a piece of her family's pain without knowing it. You were there? She asked softly, her voice trembling. With Uncle Elliot? I nodded. Yeah, he saved my life that day. I got out with a busted leg and some burns, but I made it because of him. I've carried that handkerchief ever since, like a debt I owed. I always meant to find his family, to return it, tell them what happened. But after I was discharged, it got complicated. I bounced around jobs, tried to put the pieces back together, never knew where to start looking. The crowd around us shifted uncomfortably, some dabbing at their eyes, others looking away as if intruding on something too private. The gala's glamour felt stripped away, replaced by this raw moment of humanity cutting through the pretense. Graham wiped his face with the back of his hand, composing himself enough to stand. He pressed the handkerchief to his heart one more time before looking at me squarely. "You've brought my brother home tonight," he said, voice thick. "In a way I never thought possible. Thank you for being there when I couldn't. For holding on to this." I shook my head. "I didn't do much. Elliot was the hero. I just survived." Isla stood too, her hand lingering on her father's arm. She glanced at the scar on her own face in a nearby reflective surface, then back at me, a quiet understanding passing between us. We'd both carried marks from the past, hers visible, mine hidden. But tonight, they'd connected us to this family in ways none of us expected. Graham turned to Isla, his expression softening. "You see, sweetheart, the world can be cruel, but there are still good people in it." Graham turned to the crowd, his posture straightening as if drawing on reserves of strength I hadn't seen before. The handkerchief was still clutched in his fist, but his voice when he spoke carried across the silent ballroom without need for amplification. He zeroed in on the cluster of young men near the bar, the ones whose smirks I'd overheard earlier, their words like poison darts aimed at Isla. "I heard what you said tonight," he began, his tone measured but edged with steel. "About my daughter." The group froze, their easy confidence evaporating. One shifted uncomfortably, another opened his mouth as if to protest, but Graham didn't give them the chance. "You called her broken. You laughed at her pain, at the scar she earned, surviving something none of you could imagine. You thought because you're in suits and holding champagne, you had the right to make her feel small." He pointed directly at them, his finger steady. "Security, escort these gentlemen out. Now." 2 guards materialized from the edges of the room, moving with quiet efficiency. The men stammered objections. "Mr. Armitage, we didn't mean... It was just a joke." But their voices trailed off under the weight of stares from the crowd. Heads down, faces flushed, they were led away, the door closing behind them with a finality that echoed. Graham didn't stop there. He pivoted to a group of women in another corner, the ones whose sympathetic whispers had carried just as sharply. He didn't name them, but everyone knew. "And those kind remarks laced with pity like it's a gift," he continued, his voice dropping lower but no less forceful. "You spoke of my daughter as if she were a flawed exhibit. Something to whisper about over drinks. I heard it all." Several women looked away, one dabbing at her eyes with a napkin, another murmuring to her companion in hushed regret. The room felt heavier, the golden light now exposing cracks in the facade of civility. Taking a deep breath, Graham addressed the entire gathering, his gaze sweeping like a searchlight. "Tonight, in this room full of power and privilege, a waiter, a man none of you noticed until now, gave my daughter more than all my wealth ever could. He gave her respect. He chose kindness when the rest of you chose silence." The words landed like stones in still water, rippling out. I felt a flush creep up my neck, uncomfortable under the sudden attention, but I stayed put, sensing this wasn't about me. It was about Isla, about forcing a reckoning. Then, to my surprise, Isla stepped forward, her hand slipping from her father's arm. She stood taller now, the tension in her shoulders easing as she faced the crowd, the same people who'd reduced her to a whisper earlier. Her voice started soft, wavering at the edges, but gained strength with each word. "I want to say something," she began, glancing at me briefly before continuing. "For 3 years since the accident that took my mom and left me with this," she gestured lightly to her scar without flinching, "I've let it define everything. I've hidden. I've felt unworthy. I've let words like yours turn me into a shadow." The ballroom was utterly quiet. Even the orchestra had paused, instruments resting. Isla's eyes scanned the faces, not accusatory, but unflinching. "Tonight, I thought I'd endure it like always. Sit in the corner, pretend I don't hear. But this man," she nodded toward me, "didn't look at me like a scar. He looked at me like a person. And because of that, I stood up." A murmur ran through the crowd, not of gossip this time, but something softer. Reflection, perhaps. Then applause started, tentative at first from a few tables, building to a steady wave. Not the polite clapping of a gala toast, but genuine, like a release. People rose to their feet. Some approached Isla afterward, offering quiet apologies. "I'm so sorry for my insensitivity," one woman said, eyes downcast. Isla didn't embrace them or absolve them fully. She just nodded, accepting without needing to forgive on the spot. It was enough. Graham watched her with pride swelling in his eyes, the tears from earlier dried, but the emotion still raw. He turned to me then, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "You've chosen decency when everyone else looked away," he said, voice low but firm. "That's rarer than any deal I've closed." The atmosphere in the ballroom shifted palpably, from artificial sparkle to something real, stripped bare. Guests who'd laughed earlier now seemed subdued, conversations turning inward. The golden lights felt less glaring, more like a warm glow exposing truths. That value wasn't in flawless faces or fat bank accounts, but in the quiet acts that lifted someone else. I stepped back toward the edges, ready to fade into the background again, but Graham and Isla drew me in closer, treating me not as staff, but as the one who'd unwittingly brought a piece of their lost family back. "You've returned my brother tonight," Graham said again, his grip on my arm grateful. Isla met my eyes, a silent thank you passing between us, deeper than words. The night wound down slowly after that, guests filtering out in subdued groups, their earlier chatter replaced by hushed reflections. The ballroom felt larger now, emptier, the golden lights dimming as staff began clearing tables. I edged back toward my duties, picking up a stray glass here, stacking plates there, trying to slip into invisibility again. But before I could fully disappear, Graham caught my eye and motioned me over to a quieter corner near the stage, where the orchestra was packing up their instruments. "Jace," he said, his voice steadier now, though the rawness lingered in his eyes. He still held the handkerchief, folded neatly in his palm like a reclaimed treasure. Isla stood nearby, her gown slightly rumpled from the evening's turns, but her posture held a new ease. I approached, wiping my hands on a napkin out of habit. "Sir, I should get back to—" He waved that off, his expression serious but warm. "I want to make you an offer. Not as a waiter, but as someone who's shown more character tonight than half the executives in my company. A position at Armitage. Entry level if you want, with full training. I'd cover relocation if needed, get you set up. You deserve better than trays and tips." The words hit me like an unexpected wave. It was the kind of opportunity people dreamed about, a ladder up from the grind I'd known for years. But it also felt like a reward for something I'd done without expecting payback. And that sat uneasy. I shifted my weight, glancing at Isla, who watched quietly, her hazel eyes curious. "I appreciate that, Mr. Armitage, really. It's generous. But I've got my own path mapped out. That vocational course I mentioned? It's for auto mechanics. I want to build something with my hands, on my terms. Taking a corporate job? It wouldn't feel right, not like this." Graham studied me for a moment, then nodded, respect flickering in his gaze. "Fair enough. You're not one to take handouts. But let me adjust the offer. I'll sponsor your tuition. No strings, no obligations. Consider it. Settling a family debt. Elliot saved you. You've given us closure. Let me do this." I hesitated, the practical side of me warring with pride. Years of scraping by had taught me self-reliance, but turning down help that could change things felt foolish too. Finally, I extended my hand. "If it's no strings, then yes. Thank you, and I'll pay it forward. Live kindly, like he said." Graham shook my hand firmly, his grip conveying more than words. "You've already started. You pulled my daughter out of the shadows tonight. That's worth more than any sponsorship." Isla stepped closer then, her presence drawing my attention fully. She'd removed some of her jewelry, her hair a bit looser now, making her look less like the CEO's daughter and more like a young woman finding her footing. She met my eyes, a mix of gratitude and something tentative in her expression. I don't know how to thank you properly," she said, her voice soft but steadier than before. "You don't have to," I replied. "You just need to step out of that corner more often." She let out a small laugh, genuine and light, the sound cutting through the lingering tension. Easier said than done. But tonight, it feels possible. She paused, glancing at her father before continuing. If you're ever free, maybe a day or two from now, I'd like to buy you a coffee. Not here, not in a ballroom. Somewhere normal, just to talk. The invitation caught me off guard, but not in a bad way. It wasn't pity or obligation. It was real, an offer from someone who wanted to connect beyond the chaos of the night. I nodded. I'd like that. The orchestra's last violinist tested a few lingering notes, an impromptu melody floating through the near-empty space. Isla tilted her head, a playful spark in her eyes that hadn't been there before. One more dance? For the road? I glanced around. The floor vast and vacant now, the golden lights softer like a private glow. I offered my hand again. This time, no proving anything, just ending the night right. She took it, her touch warmer, less hesitant. We moved slowly across the wood, no audience to perform for, just the faint strains of music and the quiet rhythm of steps.